because this might be the inner chronicle of what we are, and we have to articulate ourselves, otherwise we would be cows in a field.
Welcome to Cows in the Field. This is a show in which we discuss philosophical themes in popular films. My name is Justin.
I'm Laura.
And today we say goodbye. Right? It's the long goodbye. Did I do that right, Laura?
There's a long goodbye, and it happens every day when some passerby invites your eye to come her way. Even as she smiles a quick hello.
Today, our guest is Tim Smartt. Tim is a senior lecturer in philosophy at the University of Notre Dame, Sydney. Welcome to Cows in the Field, Tim.
Thanks so much for having me. Really thrilled to be here.
Tim, so I didn't know you were a big fan of Altman, and in particular, The Long Goodbye. So when you suggested this, I was very excited. Tell us a little bit about your relationship to the film. And this, I imagine you've seen it several times. And what was something about it this time that jumped out at you or was surprising?
Yeah, so this time, the thing which surprised me, or what was very, very different to the first time I watched it, is my relationship to the plot. So I'm someone who is generally super locked into like the story of a movie, how it's all like logically unfolding, where it's going, and like that's a lot of the satisfaction I get from a movie. And the first time, I remember finding the movie hard work in terms of like, wow, I got to lock in here. I got to understand what is going on. Like, who are all these characters? What do they want? Where did they come from? What is the mystery here? And then, and so it was very disorientating. It was very confusing to see how the pieces all connected together, where people's like allegiances lay. But this time, having known where the movie's going to end up, I just found it very simple. Like there's just like it just felt like there were 2 moving parts, where it's all headed. And yeah, so that was that was a pretty different experience.
I think that speaks to a feature of this film, which I'm going to go ahead and say, which I think it has, which is Matt Stroll says there are films that you have to see twice to see once.
Yep.
And I think this is one of those films. I had exactly this, not quite the same experience as you, Tim, because even the second time I was struggling to keep up with the film. But when I went back and mapped it out, I felt like I got somewhat of a grip on at least the major plot points. But I have a number of questions still for you, I think.
Yeah. I think I have an unresolved question or two as well.
Yeah, I think there's some things which are kind of interestingly elliptical in the film, which will be interesting to talk about. Laura, did you want to jump in? Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that I have a magical ability to forget the plot of a movie afterwards, even if I like remember lots of things about it. Like how every time I watch Memento, I'm like, what's going on?
Well, Memento is very hard to hold.
Yeah, okay, but I've seen it like
head.
6 times. Like you'd think I'd remember. And I was like, is Teddy good or bad, y'all? Like what's going on? Every time. So like, this movie I have to watch 10 times to watch once. But I love it.
All right, to that end, let me start this episode, our discussion of Long Goodbye, with a brief plot summary. And I'm going to do it in 2 different ways. So the first thing I'm going to do, and this is to remind the audience, hopefully you've seen it, what basically happens in the movie. Then we can zoom in to various points to talk about them in more detail. But here's the basic outline of the events that happen. Basically, all of these events, or most of these events, are off screen, but they are the crucial events that shape everything else that happens in the film. And then after I outline that, I want to just briefly outline kind of the film as we see it. So here's what happens off screen. There's a character named Terry Lennox. He and Eileen Wade are engaged in an affair. They're both married to other people. Terry's married to a woman named Sylvia. Eileen is married to a writer named Roger Wade. Okay, so they're engaged in an affair. Terry, at the same time, is hired by a gangster, Marty Augustine, to deliver somewhere in the vicinity of $350,000 to Mexico. All right. But as this is all happening, Roger Wade, Eileen's husband, discovers the affair and discloses it to Terry's wife, Sylvia, who confronts Terry, and then he kills her in, I think, a violent rage. I mean, among other things, she's threatening him to go to the police about his illegal activities, so he kills her. Then all this is sort of before the events of the film. He leaves the money with Eileen and races off to Philip Marlowe, his friend, who's the main character of the film, and begs Marlowe to drop him off in Mexico, where then he fakes his death. And by the way, this is all basically before the movie has started.
Yeah.
But it's critical because it's revealed in drips and drabs throughout the film. Importantly, it's revealed, a lot of it is revealed at the very end of the film. And I think this speaks to one of the things that might explain why we all had this reaction of very hard to understand the first time, easier to understand the second time, is that all of that stuff you figure out later, and what you're seeing, it's only kind of sort of related to that stuff, which is the central sort of plot of the film. The stuff we see on the depicted in the film, you know, the actions of Philip Marlowe as he kind of wanders around LA, sort of weaving in and out of various people's lives, is motivated by all this, but he doesn't know it or realize what's happening. And so he's kind of hitting all these dead ends and false starts. And a bunch of the stuff is I think largely plot wise irrelevant to the central sort of things that happen in the film. Okay. Anything you want to add to that as the kind of, that's not a summary of what happens in the film. That's just like a summary of like the motivating incident for the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And then the place Robert Altman decides to start all of this is with Marlowe needs cat food.
Yes, exactly. So yes, so
of course, let's start there.
So the film, and this is exactly right. The film begins with something completely unrelated to anything else that happens in the movie, which is Philip Marlowe's lying in bed. He's woken up by his cat at 3 a.m. who wants a particular type of cat food, and he has to go down and get that food.
Yeah, which is honestly like one of my favorite scenes in the history of cinema. Like I've watched this movie a few times, but I've watched that opening scene like 20 times, partly because I'm like, this is so amazing. Like this is doing something so special for me. And it's just a mystery where I'm like, why on earth would you start your movie like that? And why? Cool. Like, why does this just feel like one of the coolest things ever in the history of cinema?
It's so bold.
And then is like the final line about the cat too? Because when he shoots Terry, he's like, and I lost my cat.
Yeah.
And then there's no more dialogue. Like, so he's just like, I do care about a few things. And the cat is motherfucking one of them. Like I would go to the store for 3 a.m. for my cat. And I put my neck out for you too, asshole.
Exactly. And that's the amazing thing is it's not, as I said, it's unrelated to the plot, so to speak, but it's so critically related to, it's such a important and succinct characterization of this guy, Philip Marlowe, who we're going to spend 2 hours with.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's the kind of,
it's brilliant in that way.
Never seen so many cat foods in there. Hey, excuse me, I don't see any Curry brand cat food.
So what?
Curry brand cat food. It happens to be the only kind of food. Yeah, Curry brand, C-O-U-R.
Oh, we're all of that.
Curry
Why
brand.
don't you get this, mister? All this shit is the same anyway.
Oh, yeah? You don't happen to have a cat by any chance?
What do
do
I
you?
need a cat for? I got a girl.
Yeah. Ha-ha. He's got a girl and I got a cat.
It's tongue in cheek because he's not stupid, but the movie, like it sets it up like he is a loser, like he's losing his cat. It sets him up like he is not very intelligent because like the upshot of that scene is he didn't outsmart his cat. Like he tried to.
Yes.
He tried to switch the
Yes.
tried to switch the labels and be like, all right, I'll just like keep the cat outside the door. I'll give the cat, because the cat wants a specific kind of cat food. He goes to the shop. He can't get it. He just gets some other cat food. And so he thinks this'll do the trick. He switches the label, gives it to the cat. and the cat doesn't want it.
It's simultaneous. It's a perfect encapsulation of the character because he cares enough about, a creature like this to wake up and go and find the specific brand. When he can't find it, try to do this trick, right? He cares enough about this being this animal to do that. But he also is stupid enough to think that actually switching the cans would actually convince the cat.
Right. It's the visual that the cat's concerned about. Yeah. The picture of the can, not how it tastes or it smells.
And it's great because that's who he is. In this movie, Philip Marlowe is a person who's loyal and will do things for his friends, for the people in his life. But he's also a little bit of a rube in that he's
got the wrong end of the stick a couple of times.
Well, the world, I think the way I think of it is the world has changed and it has left him behind. Like men like him that would care to, about something other than themselves. There's not really space for them in this world. And as a result, he's made to look a fool because he's sort of out of step with the times.
And then the rest of the movie is then a series of him losing things. So he loses his cat, he loses his friend, he loses Eileen, he loses Roger. Everything's getting away from him.
Everything gets away. Yeah. Basically then the movie plays out where Philip, here's roughly what happens. Philip gets interrogated by the police because, of course, they find Terry's dead wife and they think, well, Terry did it and he came over here and you drove him to Mexico, so you're an accomplice to murder. So he gets interrogated. Of course, he has no idea about any of this. He thinks his friend is innocent. He spent some time in jail. He's let out. He's then hired by Eileen. That's where I have a question, which I'm just going to flag. She hires him to track down her husband, who's in a rehab center. He basically, Marlowe finds him, reunites them, but then he's tracked down by Marty Augustine, who is looking for Terry, who had his $350,000. Of course, Marlowe knows nothing about any of this because nobody told him. So then he basically has to. I think at that point, maybe misremembering. I think at that point he goes down to Mexico to sort of, because Terry everyone's heard that he's committed suicide, so he goes down to sort of investigate this. He comes back and he goes to a party with Eileen and Roger. It's a very testy party. Roger gets drunk and passes out. Then Eileen cooks dinner for Marlowe. They sort of are hanging out. But then at some point in their conversation, they watch Roger just commit suicide. He just walks into the ocean and dies. And then soon after, he's back being interrogated by Marty Augustine, but he's saved at the last moment by Eileen dropping off the money, driving away. He chases after her. He's hit by the car, and then he decides to go back down to Mexico, thinking that there's more to everything than he had realized, and he finds Terry Lennox. And the final bit, which apparently Altman said this scene was the reason he chose to do the movie, is he kills his friend after his friend tells him everything and says, you were a loser. Of course, we just used you. He in a very surprising and unexpected turn of events, he pulls a gun and shoots his friend. And then the last shot is just him blowing the harmonica down as he walks down the road, and Eileen's driving the other direction towards Terry.
There's also this other moving part, which is what threw me a lot the first time I watched it, which is the brilliant Henry Gibson playing Strange Doctor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Veringer.
Dr. Veringer.
Dr.
Yeah.
Veringer. Dr.
V. Who I think runs a residential, I think it's like psychiatric care or rehab center. And then, there's just a bit of, and then so the first time I watched it, I was like, okay, this guy is pulling the strings. Like this goes.
Or he's like drugging him or like something's going down. Totally. Yeah. I also love that. You have to be really quiet there. Anytime he tries.
Yeah.
Anytime Marlowe tries to talk to anybody, it made me giggle.
And then I think that might just be a little bit of I mean, it's such a great scene there at the hospital, and Gibson is so good and strange, but it's a little bit of misdirection in the plot because I think it's essentially Roger Wade owes Gibson a little bit of money,
Yeah.
and then so he's chasing him down.
Yeah.
For that, and then just on the plot, the one thing I don't understand, I don't think, is why Eileen gives Marty Augustine the money right at the end.
It's a great question. Yes.
Yeah.
Great question. So let's start there. So do you have any hypotheses about this? Laura, do you have any hypotheses about this? Okay. So yeah, do you have a thing you want to throw out there, Tim, as to why she might do this?
One was just, I thought it was, yeah, I had two possibilities. The first is just that her plan's now kind of finished. And so, Roger's dead. And so she's just happy to then go off to Mexico and start her life again with Terry.
Yep.
And so she just pays him off, and then she's like, well, that's that. Next time we see her, she's driving towards Terry. Or the second one is, that she loves him. And
That she loves Marlo.
Oh, wow.
Marlo. And she thought, I gotta save him. Like, we use this guy. And this is like this final act of kindness before she turns her back on him completely. But it is a mystery. I didn't understand it.
That's a really, I mean, I had not thought of her character with pretty much any redeeming qualities. And so her or Terry, but yeah, that would be an interesting read, is that she feels bad for him.
She has pity for him.
She knows he's in a bind, so she decides to sort of help him out.
Well, like when he asks her at one point, they're having dinner before I think he tracks down Roger. And he says, like, why did you hire me or something? And she said, I saw what you did for my friend. And then he's like, your friend. She's like, I mean, your friend. What am I saying? But but I think like maybe she really does, like, in the way Terry talks about him and talks to him at the very end of the movie, you can see that he just finds that loyalty kind of pathetic and something to use. But maybe she does actually also, like, they need to use him, and she sees the value in that, but she also kind of admires how loyal he is and feels a little bit bad for him too. She's not as cynical as Terry about it. It's
interesting because she herself refuses to acknowledge him basically at that point and forever on in the movie. So we see basically.
Well, she turns her head. He doesn't turn his head when they pass each other.
Because she's surprised.
Yeah.
but she doesn't stop the car to say, hey.
Yeah. What are you doing in Mexico, buddy?
And similarly, when he's running after her, this is after she's delivered the money to Marty Augustine and Marlo's freed. He sees her driving away, runs after her, and she doesn't again acknowledge him. So I just. It's possible that's compatible with both readings, but to me, it does suggest that she's ashamed and she does not. She's hurt this guy, and I don't think she's felt like she's exonerated herself in any way by. So that's why I like the first reading, Tim, where it's we have to think about it in the context of what is her plan overall, and I don't think what happens in the movie was her plan all along. She had something related to that, but it kind of takes an different turn. And at that point, when Roger's dead, she has no need for the money. I mean, because she's got his inheritance is already secured, and so that's what leads me to think, she's just this way she can give up the money and ensure that Marty Augustine is never going to come looking for Terry in Mexico. Or her for that matter, because we saw that he earlier was trying to interrogate her for the money. So somehow he knows Terry and her are involved in some way because he's demanding something from her. We can't hear it because we're in Marlo's vantage point at that point. But yeah, but I am interested in the question of Eileen's plan in general, but also like, why does she bring Marlo into this? Because on the face of it, she does not need to involve the guy her husband used to get to Mexico and escape. And it seems risky on the face of it because this guy is then going to be, he was just tailed by the police and arrested. under suspicion of being an accessory to murder. And, and she knows that she has the money, but Marty Augustine thinks Terry has the money. And Marty Augustine knows that that Marlowe had, taken Terry to Mexico. So involving Marlowe feels so risky, but she does it nonetheless. So do you have any idea about why she brings him into her life of, in quotes I'm saying here, to find her husband?
I couldn't really, I'm not sure, except there are these hints that he's identified with a cat and so many other people are identified with dogs.
Yes.
So they have this big dog which is always barking at them. And when he goes to Mexico, there's all these dogs, and sometimes he's just sort of freaked out by them, or sometimes they're barking at him. And so like part of it could just be that he's like, and he's just such a, like, Elliot Gould does such an amazing job of this guy who's just out of step with everything, right? And so it could just be that it's something about he's a and like Terry says to him at the end, it's like, you're a loser, like you're a born loser. Like it was something about like this is a soft target.
It's too easy,
who in a dog's world is able for us to use him or something like that.
I was starting to think about in what way were they trying to use him, and I was thinking, I mean, the thing that I came up with dovetails with how I was trying to piece together what Terry and Eileen's original plan was, but I was sort of thinking that she was trying to build a case for divorce and from Roger, so that she would then inherit some amount of, through alimony or whatever, get some amount of his not alimony, I don't know what it is when you divide up the assets in a divorce, but so she would get some of it, and then she would take that money and go live with Terry. So I kind of had the idea that she brings Marlowe in as effectively a character witness on her behalf and against Roger, because she knows that Roger, if somebody's around a lot, they're going to see him eventually explode and, be violent and potentially in some ways, or at the very least that she can say these things to Marlowe and he would believe her, because he is such a sucker in some ways, right? He's very he has a lot of credulity, especially towards women in her situation. I mean, the first time he sees her, she's got a bruise on her cheek, so she's he's primed to think there's some kind of physical abuse happening. Anyway, that's what I was sort of thinking. But then, of course, it pivots when Roger ends up dying, because then, she doesn't need Marlowe anymore. She's got the money. So anyway, so it's that's one of the interesting things about the movie is certainly I very highly doubt that Terry and her plan was that maybe it was to kill Roger, but certainly wasn't to drive him to suicide. I mean, it's very hard to do.
Yeah, and part of the dynamic of, I guess, the middle part of the movie is this interesting, sometimes it feels like Marlowe's sympathies are going more towards Roger and sometimes more towards Eileen. Like you can see him and Eileen have this like, exciting connection at her beautiful place in Malibu, and he's on the case for her. And then when he rescues Roger, and then when they, especially in that amazing scene where they're drinking on the beach, and they're just sort of bonding in this unexpected way, which is without Eileen, then you start to think like, oh, which person here is, it's obviously like a very fractious relationship, and he's getting drawn into it, and there's some tension about like which person is he truly connecting with, and then that's something that makes the death of Roger really unexpected when that happens in the window.
Yes. I kind of want to talk about Roger, but I think we should start in a way with Philip Marlowe. We've been talking around this character a lot in terms of his sort of, I don't know, he's a guy who's kind of out of time in certain ways. And that was, I guess, explicitly baked into the characterization that Altman had for Philip Marlowe, in that he was like, he wants to be a guy from the 40s who's been sort of transplanted to the 70s. This is why he drives this old car and he dresses the way he does and he smokes So these are all characteristics that I think he doesn't share with anyone else. So he sort of seems out of
Oh yeah.
step
Wait,
with-
is nobody else smoking in this movie?
Yeah.
I guess not, or at least not like maybe not cigarettes, but like
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and
nobody's
he,
carrying around matches to
Right,
light their
right. He's
cigarettes on
just-
every possible
That's
surface.
right.
Yeah, the coolest matches ever.
But I think it's so interesting then to think about Marlowe as, he's then characterized as a person who has a lot of loyalty, but his loyalty is misplaced. So he, for example, is throughout the film loyal to Terry to the point where, an hour and a half into the film, he's screaming at the police on the beach after Roger Wade's committed suicide that he has got new evidence that Terry Lennox didn't do it, because at that point, Eileen has effectively blamed the murder on her now dead husband. As we later learn, like she was totally lying, but so he believes her at that point and is anyway. So he's just super loyal to both to Terry and also Eileen, and that he thinks he buys the story that she spins that Roger, her husband, is this abusive alcoholic who was in an affair with Sylvia, who killed Sylvia when she found out about the affair, etc. And so he just totally buys all this, and it's revealed at the end that none of it's true, and he was just wrong. And we go back to the cat, and we think, yep, he's a little gullible, and he's a little bit loyal, but his loyalties are misplaced in many ways. And I think that makes him such an interesting character to think about.
Now look, Terry Lennox is dead. I want to know who killed him because that guy is dead, right? Are you going to tell me what really happened now?
He killed Sylvia. I think so. I don't know.
You said you think he killed Sylvia Lennox?
I mean, what do you think about this portrayal of? I mean, obviously Philip Marlowe showed up in the same character in all these Raymond Chandler novels. I mean, what do you think of this portrayal of him?
Yeah, I mean, I think he is incredibly lonely, and I think that's okay with him.
Yeah.
that's just the way. And then, like, what the point of that is, super interesting to think about. But like his apartment, like it's high and it's back from the street. He has a few attachments, and then those attachments end up meaning a lot to him. And that's part of what makes that final scene when he's chasing Eileen down the street. I find that really affecting because she doesn't know he's there, or she's ignoring him. And it's sort of a mirroring of like when he goes out into the night to try to get the cat food. Now he's like going out into the night to try to get Eileen, and he's losing both of them. And then so I think of it as just this loneliness where it's not something to be necessarily pitied. Like he's not miserable, but it's just it's just like a presentation of like this is what this guy is. He's pretty interior, he's pretty isolated, but he has a couple of attachments, and those mean a massive amount to him. Why that is, like whether he got left behind, whether he decided to live like that, I'm not sure.
That's a really good observation. And one of the other just very surface level characterizations of him is that he's constantly talking to himself.
Yeah.
So he keeps himself company by mumbling to himself all the time. So that's, part of his loneliness, I think.
Yeah.
The other aspect of him that I think is really interesting is that he, of perhaps the only character in the film, or at least the one I would most associate it with, is committed to the truth. He wants to know what happens. Meanwhile, Eileen and Terry are spinning lies. They're trying to confabulate. The only character that is, and I don't know how to think of Dr. Veringer, but in this regard, but Roger is also very interesting in this regard, in that I don't know. I think he's. Well, we'll talk about Roger later in a second. But anyway, at least from those three characters, he's the one who seems to genuinely care to the point where he's making large sacrifices of his time after nobody's paying him to go and try to uncover what really happened. Like, so there's a loyalty to his friend, but also a kind of desire to figure out what really happened. He's curious, as most gumshoe detectives are.
I find the voiceover, I'd be interested in how you guys reacted to this. I find the voiceover incredible in drawing me in to this movie. Like, as he's talking to himself, it doesn't always have this effect in movies, but I just feel like he's my friend and he's talking to me. Like, it has like such immediacy, like it kind of, like he doesn't have many attachments, but I find the way that you follow him around often at nighttime by himself, and as he's kind of talking to you, it just really wraps you up with him. That was my experience.
I totally agree.
But if you want to make me a couple of Yankee Doodles, so beautiful. I love the cat.
I feel like it ends though with this tiny little puzzle, because that reading, and the puzzle is just like he's happy at the end of the movie, and so it's why is he happy? Because that makes total sense to me. Like he's this person who's unattached or has like a few precious attachments, but then he's at home wherever he goes. Like he's just one of the coolest guys ever. And in every situation, like if he's in the jail cell or he's about to die from by Marty Augustine, or he's talking to his neighbors, or he's buying cat food, like whatever he's doing, he's relaxed, comfortable in this sort of like detached way, but just always at home in all these different places. And then at the end of the movie, there's like this destruction. And so like a lot of noirs or neo-noirs, like I enjoyed your episode on Body.
Body Heat.
Body Heat recently. And they end with like, okay, now look at, like they zoom in on this guy and they're like, now look how shattered this guy is. Now look how destroyed he is. That's where like the noirs work their way towards. And you would expect that. I mean, this seems like a really good example of that. But then right at the end, he's happy.
Yeah.
So I just wonder why that is. Like he's playing his little harmonica. He blanks Eileen and then he starts dancing.
Yep.
With some of the locals, and he's just lost everything. And so I just wonder why. And the ending is such a gut punch. So I just sort of wonder, why did Altman just give us that little moment of him being happy? And I don't know.
That's a great question. Do you have thoughts on this, Laura? Because the ending has to be incredible. It's significant insofar as Altman said, that's the reason I'm doing the movie. He would not have done it, he said, were it not for the ending where he kills Terry. But then you're right, to show him happy after that it's puzzling, because you could read the film as like, this guy's loyal, but he's loyal to the wrong people. When that's revealed, his killing them is like a moment of, it's like a horrible moment. It's like he's realized everything that's mattered to him in his life is wrong. And the moment of killing is like him giving up in a way, and giving over to the cynicism of the 70s that's coming, or that he already is in. But you're right, then he's happy. So what is that?
I don't know. I mean, other than there's like this like momentary catharsis and euphoria of like having unraveled this knot that's just been like, he's been teasing at it all this past 2 hours, this past few weeks of his life, and he doesn't understand it. And he finally like has clarity, but it's not a happy clarity. So I don't know.
Here's one other aspect of it. So you're right, he dances with the woman, who he just runs into on the street. The other thing is, he's playing the harmonica. Who did he get the harmonica from? He got it from the bandaged man, I guess, who, when he goes to the hospital after he's hit by the car, after he's running after Eileen gives the money to Augustine, to situate ourselves in this complicated movie. He's in the hospital, and the bed neighbor is this guy who's completely bandaged head to toe, and they share a little quick conversation as he's leaving, and the guy insists on giving him this little harmonica. So does that help us unpack this ending?
Well, I wonder, So like so much of this movie is filled, as we said, he's so at home with other people. Like it seems as if he is at home in every space. He's quippy. He's, he's sort of messing with the guy who's following him, but kind of in like a gentle, sweet way. Like, it's an honor to be followed by you. He's like, he's got all these like cute little
He's charming
interactions with people that he does not know very well. But it's like, it's a deflection. It's like if he doesn't connect with people on a vulnerable level in a real way, then he can just be Mr. Cool and he can just move on. And I feel like he just had this like horrible moment where somebody he cared for hurt him. And he's just like putting back that armor. He's just like, okay, here I go. Harmonica, do my little jig. Like, doesn't matter. It's okay by me. Like, it's okay by me is maybe just kind of like a pushing away of anything that could possibly hurt or make him vulnerable. And he's just gone back into that shell.
Yeah, it's like a mask that he wears to prevent himself from being
hurt.
Yeah.
I like that. He's wrapped himself up in his bandages again.
Yeah.
Oh, his full body bandages.
Full body
That is such a funny cut, by the way, where you think for a second that Marlowe's in the full body.
Yeah, right.
I also just love that, like, we don't actually know that guy wanted to give him the harmonica. He can't talk. He's
it's true. He can't talk, but he seems to be shoving it. You're right. Maybe he was trying to just show him.
And he goes, "It's the tiniest one I've ever seen."
Right.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah, that's right. You like my most prized possession I've brought with me.
Right. He's just like, I guess I'll practice. Thanks.
So I think the thing that surprised me the most on this watch was how much I was interested in the Roger Wade character. And actually, interestingly, how much more I was interested in that character than I was in Philip Marlowe. And potentially that's because of what you said, Laura.
He's so vulnerable.
Yeah, well,
he's so raw.
Exactly. Like Philip is keeping all these barriers up to, fend off the encroaching world. But by contrast, Roger is a live wire. He's a raw exposed nerve who everything seems to hurt him in ways that he can't process. At least he can't process without writing about it, and he's currently suffering from immense writer's block.
Blocked, yeah.
But yeah, what did you think of Roger Wade and as a character and or Sterling Hayden's performance?
I always find Sterling Hayden a complete pleasure. So this is phenomenal. Like, I really love this performance. First time I watched it, I just thought, this character seems to be modeled on Hemingway to some extent. So that was like what I was latching onto the first time. But then this time I thought maybe he's a stand-in for Altman himself.
Yeah.
Because there's all these similarities between, I guess, superficial similarities, but they add up in that Altman was really tall. He was more than 6 foot. He had a big beard. He was an artist. He was always the life of the party. He was a big drinker. At points in his life, he was a philanderer. He always owed people money. He owed money all over town. And one thing people often latch onto as one of his biggest vices is he liked to embarrass people in public, especially if you trust him in some way. He would dress you down at a party like he does to Veringer. And so I just wonder if there's something about Wade where it's Altman himself kind of popping up in the movie.
That's very interesting. I think that's very plausible. I guess for me, the thing that, and it's also possible that I don't know, I haven't read the novel, and I don't know what changes. I know there were some changes made between the plot and also, in particular, what happens to Roger Wade. In particular, he's killed in the novel and commits suicide in the film. But I don't know some of the other things. So, but I do wonder, because I feel like the first time you watch it, you're primed to believe everything Eileen says, and that's also the perspective that Marlowe's taking, which is that, Roger is an out of control guy in every respect. He's an alcoholic. He's physically violent. She needs to get away with him, but she can't quite figure out how, because at one point Marlowe says, well, you could just leave. And she says, well, last time he did that, he destroyed half the house or something like that. She destroyed all her stuff.
Right.
And so, he's a guy and he's also a guy who who makes it hard for you to root for him the first time because he's constantly, as you said, dressing people down. He's a really obnoxious character to a number of people, including his guests, including Veringer, including his wife at various points. But the second time, when you know everything that's happened, and you know that by the first time you see this guy, he knows about the affair. He knows that his wife has been unfaithful to him and does not love him. And he's processing this. And in fact, we learn from the police that he went over to Sylvia's house and then immediately checked himself into the rehab center. So like he discovers the Sylvia's body and you know, learns about the affair and everything between Terry and Eileen, and is then immediately in rehab for I don't exactly know why that would be, but he, you know, certainly seemed to do it on his own accord. But the thing that I think is so interesting is that, like, so given that he knows all this and he's extremely obviously raw about it, you can reinterpret a lot of the scenes between him and Eileen that you know, with that in mind. You can go back and look at them and you see Eileen sort of egging him on, like, well, you could leave me. You know, she's laying the seeds for him to divorce her so she doesn't have to divorce him. And he's resistant to it. And he feels, you know, he's really like pathetically trying too hard in a way to get her to stay with him. He says things like basically trying to get her to remember the times they like had really good sex or whatever these places they were romantically involved in and so on. And you know, but after, so that happens, and then, you know, he has this emotionally open, in some ways, I mean, as emotionally open as two guys can be, experience with Marla.
Goofy.
And she just leaves. You know, I think the scene then that I think also is really interesting, again, in light of the knowledge you have after you've seen the film, is the scene with Veringer at the party. And as you pointed out, like, he's really rude to Veringer. But then Veringer gets the upper hand because Veringer slaps him and Roger has no response. Yeah. He has no response. He is humiliated in front of his party to the point where he sends everyone away, retreats to the office, and pays Veringer. And then proceeds to pass out. And when he wakes up, that's when he commits suicide. So I think it's so, like, this is a guy who's been humiliated by his wife, and he knows it. And then he's humiliated by his doctor in front of everyone. And he tries in various ways to reach out to Marlo, but he can't do it because, of course, he can't admit his vulnerabilities because he's a dude. And that's hard.
And he also, like, thinks that Eileen wants to be with Marlo, maybe, too. Yeah. Like, he's jealous, too. So, yeah, they're not really able to connect.
No, yeah. So he has no one to connect with.
50 grand. You must run on a lot of luck, Mr. Wade. Most guys lose their undies when they play for those kind of stakes. Do you know Terry Lennox?
Yeah. I know Terry Lennox, but he's the kind of a guy that if I knew him, I wouldn't let on I knew him. I'd hell yeah.
Didn't like him much, huh?
Son of a bitch. Christ almighty, I didn't know him.
I hear you.
I don't know. I find that it's a really interesting character, and I love that it's that he's not just like Marlowe's not really the focal point of any of this. Neither is Roger. They're both incidental characters to the grand schemes of of Eileen and Terry.
Yeah, I wonder too if we're meant to. I think Roger's a remarkable character. Sterling Hayden is such a powerful, like, presence and then that scene where they're drinking together, I feel like Altman is inviting us to have sympathy for these two guys.
Yeah.
They're the two strange heroes of this story, and then his death is a shock. And so I wonder if we're just meant to carry that with us a little bit as he goes to that final scene in Mexico. And so part of the resolution of this story is meant to be some kind of, like, strange retribution. for Roger, like Philip Marlowe righting some wrongs for various reasons. And with a ton of loss, there's so much sadness to that, in that he's losing, he's pushing away maybe his only friend. But maybe we're meant to see that as like, yeah, the connection with Roger was something. I completely hear you that they don't really see each other. They don't really connect. But that drinking scene has something.
Something is happening. I totally agree. It's
right.
But it's what I meant. I think is just that he can't reveal his vulnerabilities to Marlowe, even though it seems like he's sort of desperate too. He's desperate to sort of tell him what he knows, but he can't bring himself to do it. And so instead they share some kind of bond, though I totally agree, over the alcohol, to the point where then later, after he's died, Marlowe himself says, like, I was starting to think he was a good guy. He says something to that effect about Roger.
I know Roger is very wealthy, very successful, but there are two people who, if you look at like the Malibu colony, you could think it's like they're kind of getting left behind, or they're sort of like peas in a pod in, like, Terry Lennox and Eileen, and maybe like the larger Malibu community who were there in the 70s enjoying that party. Like, maybe there's not much of a spot left for Roger Wade or Elliot Gould anymore.
I think that's a good observation, because neither of these guys fit in the time they're in which is this sort of ex-hippie, I don't know, land dominated by Marty Augustines. By the way, should we talk about Marty Augustine? What a strange character
and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
But Marty, I mean, to me, Marty, the main thing that Marty does that is shocking, but also helps you understand like what world we're living in here, is when he breaks the bottle over his girlfriend's face to prove a point to Philip Marlowe. Is like, that's what I do to people that I love. And you're like, this is fucking crazy. This guy is insane. And he's, I love too that, he's played by Mark Rydell, who's like the opposite of a physically imposing human being, like as far as you can get. Maybe I'm less physically imposing, but only a little bit.
He is in perfect physical condition because he plays a lot of tennis. Is that right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
There is a bit of tennis in this movie.
Physical connection.
What do you think of Marty? Yeah. I find this character like hilarious.
I mean, I feel like he's an old timer. Like, I think about him all the time, and I remember him. But I think it's just because, and Altman was great like this. I think where he would just, he just really wanted a character to be like no one else you'd ever seen, like to be like entirely their own thing. And he was so collaborative in that, like he would give the actors like a ton of rope to do that for themselves. And so I remember him, like that line, like the complete unexpected violence where he smashes the Coke bottle against his girlfriend's face. And it zooms in or it cuts in, and it's like, it's really shocking. And it's maybe one of the only moments of violence in the movie.
Yeah. Besides like the ending.
Besides like, the actual shot.
Yeah. Largely like a guy walking around Los Angeles at night wondering what's going on. And then
one of the best genres of movies.
True. And just that line. Look what I did to her.
Yeah.
That's someone I like. That's someone I love. You I don't even like. I think that's just such a brilliant.
It's brutal.
Amazing.
I love that his characterization is that he goes to really elaborate lengths to prove a point or to like, I don't know, achieve his ends.
The second time he's like, we're all getting naked.
We're all getting naked.
I mean, let me tell you a story.
Here's one thing about Marty that I do find interesting. So after the money is delivered and Marlowe's leaving, Marty Augustine says, hey, here's your $5,000 that I took from you. I appreciate that you didn't lie to me. And I think it's interesting. Like there's a kind of honor.
He's got his code too.
Yeah, there's a kind of honor amongst thieves between these guys where when he realizes, he's just like, yeah, sorry, man. Like, and then that money is used.
He's like, my almost cut off your penis, but not today.
Still. But he uses that money to find out about where Terry is because he uses it to bribe the police. So in Mexico.
It's charity. It's not a bribe.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
And then it's this funny thing about Marlowe where he connects with everyone and no one.
Yep.
So
Yep.
even this person who's the, the villain of the movie and has multiple times threatened him, it's very easy to be like, okay, we're done now.
Yeah.
We'll see you later.
Yeah, we kind of like you. Like everyone kind of likes
Yeah.
him. Even the police sort of like him. It's like I don't know, maybe that's not right. But I feel like they have they kind of find him funny.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he's the definition of we all knew that kind of guy or girl in like college who just was sort of seemingly friends with everyone.
Yeah.
But also didn't
It was
seem
like a
to
bit
have
of a
any
floater.
deep
Yeah.
relationships with anyone. They were just sort of happy to kind of be present. And you every time you go to a party, they would be there. And you're like, wait, how do you know these people?
Yeah.
Somehow, I don't know. There was always that person.
Morning, Harry. Have a good night.
Hey, Marlo. Hey, you know those girls that live next door to you? You know what I think? I think they're a couple of lesbians. That's what I think.
Oh, yeah, what makes you say that?
Well, look at them up there doing all those contortions together and with no clothes on.
Oh, they're just doing yoga.
What?
Yoga. I don't know what it is, but it's yoga.
Yeah, what do they do for a living?
They dip candles.
What?
Yeah, they got a cute little shop over on Hollywood Boulevard. They dip them and sell them.
I can remember when people just had jobs.
Yeah. Listen, Harry, in case you lose me in traffic, this is the address where I'm going. You
Thank
look
you.
great. Harry, I would straighten your tie a little bit.
Yeah.
Harry, I'm proud to have you following.
What's your general relationship with Altman, and where do you sort of see The Long Goodbye for you falling in terms of his oeuvre?
Yeah, I mean, Altman is one of my favorites. He's someone I've come to just later, like recently, in that I think I definitely saw this movie as a teenager, and it was lost on me. I didn't
It's very hard.
appreciate it. I think I struggled with the tone and the shagginess of it.
Mhm.
But these days, my experience is, you have that kind of like urge to trace the source of a lot of stuff you like, where you're like, oh, I'm into this stuff. I should be into whatever the generation was before that. And so Paul Thomas Anderson is one of my favorites, and he's very straight up on, I think he said a few things like, I've stolen as much from Altman as I'm allowed to, or as is polite to do, or something like that. And so like remarks like that got me interested in it. And so, the past 5 or 6 years, I've watched a ton of Altman movies, and then discovering this one is really special because you can just see the influence it's had on, I even see a lot of like Body Double in this.
Yeah.
And which would have been like a pretty close, proximate influence, but then films like obviously Inherent Vice and Under the Silver Lake and things like that. But I really enjoy Altman as a whole, because I feel like there's this moral vision to a lot of what he does. Like his movies are so shaggy and they're so loose and they're so different. Like they hop around times and places quite a bit, but he's often just really interested, or he's really like pressing this anti-institutional line, which I think was personal for him, because I take it like his big struggle in his life was like dealing with the studios. Like he hated the studios, that he had to work with these systems which had all these different interests in it to make the art that he loved. And then you see it in this movie. I feel like the moral vision is just like exploring, like, well, how much do you have to, like, how detached can you be from a system and still find a way to do what you want? Or still find a way to live a good life or something like that. And that's kind of exactly what Marlowe's doing. So he's doing his thing, he's solving cases, but he's not a part of the institution. Like he's not a part of the police, but he's not a part of the counterculture either, which is saying, let's have a revolution, or let's just throw out the institutions completely. Like he finds his neighbors who represent the counterculture just as kind of baffling, or he's like as out of step with them as he is with the police. And then within this worldview, then in Altman's movie, the people who come in for the harshest treatment, so the people who really stand out as the fools, are the people like Veringer, the people who represent an institution in some way, who's given themselves over to being an embodiment of the system. So at some point, I think it's Sterling Hayden says it's this place that's sick. It's not the people, which is just like Altman's vision to a T. Like anytime you get like people together in an institution, they're going to be like he wanted to see the people flourish, which he brought to his art in trying to give actors a lot of rope. But then the institutions, which he just thought they get in the way, or they make things complicated, or they diminish what people are trying to do. So then he's in this strange kind of dance with trying to resist and reject institutions, but without like being a total revolutionary or something like that.
No, I love this. I think, clearly in this film, that worldview is portrayed in the form of the police being both like somewhat inept at their jobs, but also like completely cynical and uncaring. They just don't care about who killed Sylvia Lennox. They just don't care. They're just like, we pinned it on Terry. Solved. He's dead. Move on. They just we don't care.
And they pull dirty crap. Like he's like, well, you don't have a warrant, so you can't actually talk to me. So they push him into there. Like, sorry, you attacked a police officer. Let's go. Like it's just like shitty stuff like that where they like know how to work the system, work the the rules that they have to their advantage. They don't give a shit about justice.
But I like though that, as you point out, if Marlowe is the anti-institutionalist, and Wade, both in some ways are anti-institutionalists. Things don't end that well for them. I mean, Wade dies by suicide, and Marlowe has to confront his misplaced loyalties and ultimately kill his friend, and be at the end of the film more alone than he was at the beginning of the film, which was pretty damn alone. So perhaps it's suggesting that when you fully reject these institutions, you are genuinely in your iconoclasm a loner, and you're condemned to be forever alone, which is quite sad, even though Marlowe seems happy at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a wrinkle in Altman's worldview that I think he struggled with a lot in his movies, and it sounds like in his life as well. Like people report that. So he hated the studios, and he hated having to deal with them. But at the same time, he also kind of wanted their respect, and he wanted to win, and he wanted accolades and approval. And so, I think there's this kind of, and then when you resist that and move away from it, Justin, like you were saying, you end up more alone or something like that. And so, there's this kind of strange dance with wanting to, play your own game, wanting to not be a hand of the institution like the cops or like Veringer or something like that. But then, like, where does that leave you? How far will you be able to get with that? Will that affect your attachments or your...
It also is reflected, I think, in the fact that a lot of Altman's films, there's this kind of cynical, almost, not mean-spirited, but a kind of gallows humor in the cynicism often, and I think that is the inevitable result of, if you are an iconoclast and you're somewhat lonely and you kind of feel like everyone's, all these institutions are wrong in their own ways, but there's nothing that's preventing me from forging really strong connections with anyone. Then you're left with this sort of, well, what can you do except sort of laugh at the situation you've found yourself in by your own design.
Exactly. Or throw a party.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's involved. It's like,
And
you hear every voice, and it's confusing and glorious and messy, but that's like, I think that was his vision.
Right. But actually, no, you're right, because compare this film to Nashville, where in this film, you've got one guy on his own. In Nashville, you have the construction of chosen family. And that's the thing that Paul Thomas Anderson picks up. That's the theme that he really, really locks into, is the idea that characters are often in the PTA films finding families outside of both their biological or, families that raised them, but also forging these relationships outside of the bounds of the standard institutions. So they're they're doing so in the porn industry, or they're doing so in Scientology, which is by definition in some ways outside of the standard religious context. But they're trying to form ultimately these family units and and connections and things, and that's like the non-cynical response. That's the like, yeah, we can make our own thing and be and sort of flourish together. Of course,
then almost a lot of those chosen families kernel in
Paul
PTA
Thomas Anderson
movies.
yes.
Yeah.
And then and then that is the kind of difficult moral project I think Altman would think of as like the thing that's really worth pursuing, or that he would encourage people to try to do. And yeah, like in the worst cases, like where it goes off the rails, you have that scene in There Will Be Blood that I find just excruciating, where Plainview is at the restaurant, and he's like talking loudly to like make fun of the bankers or the competitors at the other table, and it's just this. I mean, it's so cringy and embarrassing, but where he's like announcing and performing like his separation from people he could have been in partnership, and it's just this awful picture of the detachment. And then there's of course lots of other ones in that movie as well. Or are you able to make something which is, kind of like one of the great moments in Nashville, where like when the darkness comes, people come together and they sing, and the people get their moment who haven't had their moment before.
Yeah. Tim, this was really great. I really appreciated having the opportunity to revisit The Long Goodbye, a film that is very dear to me. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And as for us folks, we are as always at Cowspod on all the social media sites. You can find us on the web at www.cowspod.com. In 2 weeks, we will be hitting off our AI miniseries of 2 films. The 2 films are Ex Machina and 2001. So in 2 weeks, we'll be doing Ex Machina with Aaron West, the author of the A24 New Wave. So join us then in 2 weeks. Bye.